All right, good morning and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Monday morning, the 8th of December 2025. We are coming closer and closer, or edging closer and closer towards the tail end of the year. And it's usually that period of the year when we get to question what we have been able to achieve or have failed to achieve uh, in the course of the year. For us here on the Football Tribe UG channel, a lot has been achieved, and yet there's plenty still to be achieved. There's plenty to get done. But while we wait to achieve all our objectives that we set out, we have to continue with the debate, with the discussion in as far as football is concerned. And we do continue this morning with the debate on Mohamed Salah in the wake of his interview in the mixed zone with the journalists. We'll be giving you the reactions from some sections of the football community, those that agree with him, those that do not agree with him, among other things. But also, we'll be discussing Man United in their trip away to Wolverhampton Wanderers. Yesterday, Real Madrid were beaten up by 2-0 at the hands of Celta Vigo to leave Barcelona with that 4 points gap at the summit of the La Liga standings. It's a game in which Real Madrid finished with a man less following the sending off of Joan Garcia. Fran Garcia, yes. He was sent off with 2 yellow cards in the space of 1 minute. So it did not look pretty. Meanwhile, Napoli managed to overcome Juventus, beating them by 2-1. Scott McTominay among the goal scorers in that one, while Kenan Yildiz had scored to restore parity for the visitors before Rasmus Højlund scored his second of the night to ensure that they walked away with all 3 points. That is for Napoli. So allow me to have our audios tested before we get into the depth of today's discussion. But I hope you're doing well on this beautiful Monday morning. Looks like we're good. Looks like we're good in as far as our audios are concerned. So please do join the conversation. Do share the broadcast with your friends. Invite them to join. To all our new community members, our new subscribers, with a thank you for joining the community. We appreciate the time you're taking to watch our content, and we hope you do enjoy your stay here with us. For the views where you agree or disagree, do not hesitate to let us know down in the comment section. We'll always digest those on any given day. So, anyways, allow me, first share this somewhere, perhaps on one of our forums before we can proceed to the actual conversation. But yeah, I want to say thank you so much to my friend Paul. You were part of last night's podcast. Thank you so much, Pedri, for making it last night. There's a gentleman called Sky. I'm forgetting the other name, from Uganda as well. Thank you so much for being part of, last night's podcast, and every single one of you that managed to tune in for that fruitful debate in which we discussed, the situation of Mohamed Salah following that explosive interview. We discussed that at great length. But there've been because it's an ongoing debate, I thought we should carry it on in the context of some of the reaction that is coming through from certain sections of, of the public and things like that, really. So for me, there's one place to start, and we will begin with the reaction of. I want to begin with the reaction of Jamie Carragher on Mo Salah. I mean, like I told you last night, or just a couple of days back, Sometime this season, Yemi Karaga had criticized Mohamed Salah for literally never speaking out, for always choosing to stay silent. And he did say that the only time he comes out to speak is when he has won the Man of the Match award or when he wants to get a new contract, which I thought was very unfair, a comment from Yemi Karaga. Especially for the status he enjoys as a former Liverpool player. I thought that was very unkind of him. Then he also went on to highlight that until in the aftermath of their game against Southampton in the EFL Cup, he had only stopped twice in the mixed zone, with the journalists. Now, it's at his discretion, Mo Salah, to choose when to speak or to stop. The mixed zone is where journalists get to meet players in the aftermath of the game. Players from whichever the team is. And they do not get to handpick who comes out and speaks. And usually in the mixed zone, a player, it's basically players walking out, to go, dressing rooms or exit the stadium. And, journalists, sort of shout questions at them. Or you try to ask somebody a question to bring their movement to a halt so that you can have a short conversation. Now, some players prefer not to speak, so they walk away. Others will just say hello, or they'll give you a few comments. It was a great game or not the result we wanted, but maybe hopefully better next time. The usual stuff. Now, Yemi Karaga, a couple of weeks ago, like I said, criticized Mo Salah for not speaking out. And then Mohamed Salah chooses to come and speak out. And then Karaga is not too pleased. In other words, he doesn't love what he hears. Dear Yemi Karaga, you cannot have your cake and eat it. You cannot get to pick and choose. You cannot ask Mo Salah to speak out, and then suddenly when he speaks out, you do not like what he speaks. There was no prerequisite or pre-agreement that you'd, love what he had to say. Perhaps it is with good reason that he rarely speaks out, And again, there's a lot of comments to this. In part of the comments from Mo Salah at the time, and he went on to cite Yemi Karaga in part of his interview, when he said, "After what I've done for the club, it really hurts. You can imagine, really. I know the club too well. I've been here many years. Tomorrow, Yemi Karaga is going to go for me again and again. That's fine." So, you remember yesterday, for those of you that were part of our conversation, I said, Mo Salah is not ignorant to know what's happening or what is going to happen. He knows. That's why in his interview, he cites different examples. For his lack of form, he cites the example of Harry Kane, when he went 10 games without scoring, and how the media went about that, and how he was treated, or how everybody was, being encouraged that, look, he will eventually score. He's just having a bad spell. In sheer comparison, for him, the clamor is that he should get benched because he's having a bad spell. So he cited that example. Then he also knows too well, and he says this perfectly well for me. I know the club too well. I've been here many, many years. Tomorrow, Yemi Karaga is going to go for me again and again. In other words, whatever Yemi Karaga is going to say, he's already expecting it. There's nothing new Yemi Karaga is going to say. I don't know if you guys remember, but last season, or at least 6 months ago, Mo Salah sat in an exclusive interview with Sky Sports. And that interview was done by, interestingly, Gary Neville. Do you think it was by mistake that it was Gary Neville who did the interview and not Yemi Karaga? Because how many times do we see club legends or former players do interviews with current players of those clubs? It does happen quite often. So one, I found that very interesting. So the fact that he highlights Yemi Karaga and how he's going to go on about him very soon is what tells you everything you need to know in terms of Mo Salah's headspace. In other words, that he does expect everything that is going to come his way. So now, according to Anfield Papers, and this is on X, Jamie Carragher, in response to the interview by Mohamed Salah, this is what he had to say. So listen. He said, and I quote, "Listen, you are the king of Egypt, the greatest winger in the Premier League history, and I get that you feel wronged. But the truth is you've been awful, and now you have to, and now you throw a strop only when it's about yourself." Remember when I said there's a bit of selective listening and people are not reacting to the overall interview and not picking out certain statements? The keywords, this is a perfect example for it, because he says he's thrown a strop only when it's about himself. I don't know if it is me who have read the half script of the interview, or it is Yemi Carragher who read half of it. Because in essence, that interview is not just about himself. As he speaks about himself, he's painting a picture of what is happening in the club. Let's complete the quote. He goes on to say that legends like Kenny, meaning Ken Dalglish, Rush, and a few others would never have behaved in this way, and he's acting childish in my eyes. Why say this now? This is a time where he should be hanging his head in shame and apologizing to Anna for his conduct. Now, oftentimes it's easy for us to say that you should have reacted or acted in a certain manner until it is ourselves finding in your shoes. There's one of my favorite quotes is, "Until you walk a mile in a man's shoes." It's one of my favorite quotes. That really you judge somebody until you walk a mile in their shoes. Take it easy on them. Do not be too hard or in their judgment, whether you believe it's for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons that you criticize them. So it's pretty convenient for Yemi Carragher to cite these examples, Ken Dalglish and Rush, as having not behaved this way. The question is, were they ever treated in the manner that Mo Salah has been treated? Not that I know of. And if they ever did, somebody leave me a comment down in the comment section and let me know if it ever happened to him. Now, for a bit of background context, we all know what's happened with Liverpool this season. We all know how they've struggled for results, especially after the first sort of 1.5 months or 2 months of the season. After that period, we know how they've struggled for results. But beyond that, Mo Salah, for the last 3 consecutive games, has been benched. And basically, he speaks in this interview to say he's not too pleased about it, to say he's not happy that he is being benched. And again, hear me out on this one. It is not unique for a player like Mo Salah to get benched. For those of you that do remember, sometime at Barcelona, even though he did not last there long, Tata Martino is one of the managers that showed subsequent managers that Messi would be benched. And I do not believe it with with any single grain worth salt that he was doing it for selfish or personal reasons. No. Apologies on the internet glitch there, guys. Sorry about that. Unfortunately, bad things happen. And I think I stand to be corrected. My internet subscription should be due today. Anyways, like I was saying, Tata Martino at Barcelona is the one that started sort of not the ideation, but to try and start to paint the picture that Barcelona needed to start transitioning away from that crop of players. And in him sort of benching Lionel Messi and some of the others in some of their games was signal to that, to say, these guys have been great. They are still great. But we need to start thinking how we transition away from them. This happens to all players that sort of stay at a club for very long and possibly want to see out the rest of their career at the club. Look at a player like James Milner. For all he's achieved, and I think he's made the second most highest appearances in Premier League history, only a few games behind Gareth Barry. For all he's achieved within the Premier League, I think he won the league with Man City, won it with Liverpool. His seniority, his experience, you'd think that he would be every game week the first name on the team sheet for Brighton. But that's not the case. So he appreciates that he's at the tail end of his career. And no matter how good you are a player, legend or not, there comes a point in time in your career where, regardless of which manager it is that you're playing for, you're going to get benched. I do not think that nobody knows that more than the players themselves. I do not think. 2, benching Mo Salah is therefore not unique and is not unexpected. But the frequency with which you do it, really he's getting roasted or being blamed for the poor results of the team, is what causes a problem. Take an example. If Mo Salah had been benched and suddenly they were winning game in, game out, maybe he would have had to take a bitter pill and said, okay, maybe the manager is right here. I'm not having a good spell. The team is winning, so be it. 1, he's been blamed, rightly or wrongly, depending on how you look at it, for their poor performances. And yet, even when he's been put to the sidelines, they've not done any better. I think it was one game that they won. Was it against West Ham? I suddenly had some voices, oh, you see, they're playing better without Mo Salah. Cut the crap. We're talking about one of the most consistent players over the last 8 seasons in the Premier League, if not the most. If you go back in the last 8 years, Mo Salah is gone toe-to-toe with Harry Kane, with the likes of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, with the likes of Sadio Mane, his former teammate, with the likes of Brad Erling Haaland, with the likes of Sadio Kun Aguero, among many others. That's the level. And that's the consistency he's delivered. So, when he comes out to express this level of dissatisfaction with how things, and again, go back to his statement where he cites Jamie Carragher. And he says, I know the club well. I've been here many, many years. When you've been around the block for long enough, as you and I may have been around football, there's certain things you pick on. There's certain things you come to expect to happen in the game of football. Particularly for Mo Salah, there's certain things he knows. How the club behaves, how they go about the media, how, if they want to push a narrative out, how they go about it. These are subtle things you pick up on, being around the block. And when something happens, this has come from inside, in this section. If it is another narrative, that's just the media being the media. In his same interview, he did speak about being pushed under the bus. That's how he feels. And the fact that perhaps somebody in the club wants him out. Again, like I said yesterday, I do not think Mo Salah is naive to say those words. He is not. He's far from it. Sometimes the advantage with football players is that when you get benched, oftentimes, beforehand, the manager will be candid with you. They will tell you, you're not going to start the game. It's so and so that will be starting. You're going to be on the bench. And then you chin in and then wait for your moment to be called upon to help the team, or at least play your part in the game. Unfortunately for Mo Salah, over the weekend, he did not come. And for some of the people that are criticizing him, try to paint a picture as though Arne Slot is the first manager to bench Mo Salah. Jurgen Klopp did it. I don't know if you guys remember, there's a bit of a spat between Mo Salah and Jurgen Klopp when they were getting ready to come on, I think alongside Darwin Núñez and which other player. I do not remember the game particularly. But even Jurgen Klopp did it. And whereas they had their spat in there, they resolved their issues and moved on, as is the nature of sport, as is the nature of relationship around a working environment. Sometimes we disagree quite bitterly, but we have to mend faces and move on for the better of the team. In this particular case, some people are trying to drive the narrative that suddenly Mo Salah has committed haram. For our friends from the Muslim community, you'll know what we mean by that. That he's made a mistake so grave that he cannot come back from it. Again, we are talking about one of the greatest Liverpool players ever. I do not think, for however old Liverpool are, that when you go back in their history books to bring out some of the most impactful players, that you're going to go beyond 5-7 names without reading Mo Salah, unless you want to be unfair to yourself or to him. I've also seen a narrative, and this is typical of English media, by the way. Somebody made the argument that Steven Gerrard carried that Liverpool team on his shoulders more than Salah has done. Now, of course, usually I'm not one kind of person that likes to compare different generations, because different generations meet their own challenges and differences in overall context. For example, when you go back to the period between, let's say, 1981 to 1990, I find that a different period compared to the period between 1991 to 2000, and the period between 2001 to 2010, and onwards, in every 10 years, as is the nature in football. Apologies, guys. I've told you this before. My chair is a bit squeaky. It's always keeping me on toes. I'm always fearful that it's going to give way in the course of a broadcast, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. So, for people that are trying to draw comparisons between Mo Salah and his legendary status in comparison to Steven Gerrard, let's not forget that as young as he was at the time, in 2005, Steven Gerrard inspired Liverpool to UEFA Champions League title, having gone 3 goals down by halftime to beat up against AC Milan, in post-match penalties that preceded a 3-3 draw. I mean, he was referred to Captain Fantastic for a reason. But at the end of the day, he won one UEFA Champions League title, as has Mo Salah. So if we are putting both players on the weighing scale, yeah, bear that in mind. Forget not that Mo Salah scored in that final against Tottenham Hotspur in 2019. Forget not that Mo Salah has helped Liverpool go to more UEFA Champions League finals than Gerrard ever did. Because after them winning the 2005 final, they went back in 2007, and lost to AC Milan by 2-1. Mo Salah was there in 2018. They lost to Real Madrid. They went back in 2019. They won. They went back in 2022 and lost to Real Madrid. So that's context. Two, the reason as why it's also difficult to compare those two different eras. Steven Gerrard, good as he was, you can count on your hands how many times, how close he brought Liverpool to touching the Premier League title. In any case, if you wanted to be malicious, as the English media tends to be sometimes, especially on foreign players, we could sit here and make the case that Steven Gerrard cost Liverpool a Premier League title, and that he cost eventually Brandon Rodgers his job. Do you remember that season? I think, was it 2013, 2014, when Manchester City eventually clinched the Premier League title? Do we remember that? Do we remember how Liverpool slipped? That Man City side that was under the charges of Manuel Pellegrini. Liverpool versus Chelsea. Who slips to concede possession before Papisi Dembaba goes on to score for Chelsea in that 2-0 victory? Jose Mourinho in his second stint with Chelsea. He was there when they drew against Crystal Palace in that 3-3 draw. Dwight Gale, I think, scoring brace in that one. So, really, I do not want to think that Steven Gerrard holds a bigger legendary status at Liverpool just because he captained the side from a young age up to until when he hung up his boots than Mo Salah. Mo Salah joins the club in 2017 from AC Roma. Of course, Jurgen Klopp is in charge at this time and is building his project. And in 2020, for the first time in 30 years, Liverpool clinched a Premier League title. Their first. Not the first league title, but their first Premier League title. Remember the change of names or rebranding there. And 4 years later, he guides them to their second. The closest Liverpool came to winning a Premier League title, because they eventually lost it by 2 points, because they lost to Chelsea and they drew to Crystal Palace. Had they won against Chelsea and won against Palace, the title was theirs. The closest they came had been, again, I think we have to go back to 2008-2009 season. That's when Rafa Benitez Maudis went toe-to-toe with Sir Alex Ferguson for the Premier League title. But eventually, Manchester United clinched the title with 4 points ahead of Liverpool. Liverpool having drawn one too many games. They drew as many as 11 games in that season. They only lost 2, United lost 4. But United only drew 6 games. So, other than those 2 seasons, and I stand to be corrected, guys, if you know any other, you can bring it to my knowledge. But other than the 2008-2009 Premier League season and the 2013-2014 Premier League seasons, I do not remember a time when Steven Gerrard guided Liverpool to a title pursuit, as had been the case in those two occasions. How many times has Mo Salah done it? Besides having won it twice, in the 2018-2019 season, when Manchester City won the Premier League title, I think possibly is it when they win it with 98 points? Yes. That Liverpool side pushed Manchester City. Again, they only lost one game. That loss coming against what was it? What team beat them? Struggling to remember. If somebody does record it, please leave me a comment down in the comment section. And I hope our comments are all turned on because sometimes YouTube tends to filter them out. Okay. 2018-2019, they finished with 97 points, with only Man City ahead of them, with just by a point. That was another title challenge. They come back in 2021-2022 Premier League season. Again, Manchester City get the better of them by just a point. Liverpool finished with 92 points, Man City with 93 points. Mo Salah is part of that team. And not just a squad member, a significant member of the squad. Yesterday, we looked at his numbers over the last 8 seasons. And oh my God, there's not a single season where he's had anywhere less than a 30-goal contribution across all competitions for goals and assists. There's not a single season where he's had less than 30. That is consistency. That is pedigree. While reacting to this situation, Rio Ferdinand came out to say everything we said yesterday. And again, like we did yesterday, when we drew comparisons, he drew the same comparisons. And that I found that very fulfilling in a way, or very interesting. In part of his submission, he says that, look, when it comes to great players, whether they are on form or off form, you can always count on them to impact a game of football. And he said, in their days, there's no way Sir Alex Ferguson was going to refuse to summon Cristiano Ronaldo or Wayne Rooney off of the bench to try and help the team just because they were not on form. He goes on to point the direction he goes on to point his finger in the direction of Arsene Charles Wenger, that there is no way he was going to leave Thierry Henry on the bench just because he wasn't on form. Because great players, somehow, somewhere, can conjure up something. He went to cite those examples. But also, this season, maybe some people need a reminder. When Liverpool were winning against FC Bournemouth by 4-2, at what point does Mohamed Salah's goal come? Wasn't it very late on in the game? After Federico Chiesa had come on to score to make it 3-2? That's when his goal comes. When they were beating up against Burnley by 0-0, Mohamed Salah scores from the penalty spot in the 85th minute. Why was he given the responsibility to take that penalty? Because he's trusted. I'm not saying he's not missed penalties before. He has. But that responsibility lay on his shoulders. 2, again, still about the reaction on his interview. Somebody was saying that the interview was at the wrong time. And their justification was, and this, by the way, was, I think, by Mark Goldbridge. He says, making the interview in the aftermath of that 3-3 draw, again, he's trying to blame Mo Salah for making him all about himself. And he thinks that even if Mo Salah had been brought on, it wouldn't have made any difference because he wouldn't have defended for Liverpool not to concede. Again, that would be missing the point. I think that is the wrong argument. When your team is losing, I'm not sure there is a manager that brings on a striker to defend. So let's not think that Mo Salah's coming on would about them defending. It would have been about finding a goal that then makes the difference. In that game, you cannot tell me, you cannot convince me that when the manager assessed the game, there was no room for Mo Salah. I do not want to believe so. And whereas it could be true that he's had a bad spell, benching Mo Salah without using him at all in some instances is as if to suggest, again, that he is the problem in the team, that suddenly everybody else is okay other than Mo Salah. But let's face it, have all those Liverpool players been great? How many have been treated in the same manner as Mo Salah? How many times has Ibrahim Konate been benched? Again, I understand the context is different, but I'm just trying to paint for you a picture. And I'm not saying that Ibrahim Konate should be benched. But we've seen he's committed some errors. He's been found wanting in his form in recent times. When you go to the forward positions or the midfield, have been McAllister, Dominic Soboslai, and Ryan Gravenberch at the top of their game in, game out? I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so. In any case, which Liverpool player has carried that Liverpool team on his shoulders to ensure that they get out of the mess in terms of form that they do find themselves in? I don't think any single player has carried that responsibility. But also, let's not forget, we are talking about a player, the PFA Player of the Year last season, a player who scored 28 Premier League goals and provided 18 assists. Let that sink in. So, without a doubt, Liverpool's best player, and not just last season, but over many seasons. So, we're not talking about benching any other player. But like I said, benching him is not the problem. But failing to use him at all is where it becomes a problem. So, for people like Mark Goldbridge to say that it was the wrong time to react in the aftermath of such a 3-3 draw was the wrong time, would it have been better if he had made the reaction after they had lost? Because then you'd actually paint him as a worse villain than you're already painting him. You'd say, oh, now the team that is winning without him, he can't stomach it. He can't stand it. He's seeking relevance. You know? If the team had lost, if they had lost, you'd still maintain the same narrative. He's making it about himself. The team is already not doing well enough. Blah, blah, blah. So tell me, when would have been the perfect timing for Mo Salah to voice his frustration, his opinions? All football players will tell you, good or bad, young or old, that it never feels good when you're on the bench. Especially if you're not even just coming back from an injury, but you know you're fully fit. Now, if Kobe Mainu at Manchester United does feel the frustration of being benched without being given minutes, how about Mo Salah? And no offense to Kobe Mainu, very good player, one of those players that I do appreciate. But he's a young player. But if Kobe Mainu feels aggrieved that he's not getting game time, to the extent that he almost foresaw this, or actually did foresee this, and had requested the club to let him go at least out on loan. How about Mohamed Salah, who beams with self-confidence in his own abilities? Let's be fair to the discussion. So, people are saying that Mo Salah is trying to make it about himself because he's been benched. We can agree that any player can be benched. That we can agree. But the question is he the only one underperforming? Has every underperforming player been benched at Liverpool? I don't want to think so. Why? Because deep down in our thoughts, in our minds, in our speculative nature, we do believe that those players are capable of impacting a game, that they are capable of rising out of their ruins at any given one point and can make good of their own talent. It's simply just what it is, So when you go back to the interview he did 6 months ago with Sky Sports, with Gary Neville, he does speak about his relationship with Anna Slot, and he speaks of it being a very good relationship and one that born out of respect of how Anna Slot wanted him to play, how he wanted him to exploit spaces, and things like that. He spoke about that relationship being broken and almost non-existent at present day. This reminds me of a report that I was reading of how Jose Mourinho told Henry Mkhitaryan that he did not want him at Manchester United anymore, that he wanted to bring in Alexis Sanchez. The difference is here is you have a manager and player who are not talking. And again, yesterday I made reference to Danny Murphy was pointing Mohamed Salah to the doorbell of Anna Slot to speak to him as manager. Again, by the time he came to the media, I'm sure he must have explored those options. We are talking about a manager who he sees every single day on the training ground. Every single day of training. They meet. Every match day, they sit on the same team bus. So are you saying that you want to lead us to believe that Mo Salah, in that span of time, has failed to find an audience with Anna Slot? I told you it can happen two ways. You can seek the audience, but it may not be given to you. You could be brushed off. You could be postponed week in, week out, or day in, day out to say, let's do this tomorrow. Let's have that conversation on Wednesday. Let's do it. You see there's a game coming. Can we, like that? And you get tossed around. And it doesn't take long before you get frustrated. Could be the case. I'm not saying it is the case, but I'm saying could be the case. So really, for all those that want us to believe that Mo Salah is the villain for saying what he said, until you walk in a man's shoes. And surprisingly for me is that some of the people saying these things, and you see, we have this ultimate respect that we give former players and former managers when they come to speak about players and context and things like this, because we believe they lived that life before. They know what it means. Unfortunately for majority of them that are speaking about this Mo Salah situation, their career achievements are no better than mine and yours in terms of playing the game. But let's not get into that banter. That was a joke, by the way, in case you didn't get it. But that's how I want to look at it. So I do not think there would have been a better time for him to say what he said. And like he said, I saw somebody, I think on BBC Sport or Sport 5, something like that, trying to drive a narrative that, again, Mo Salah is making it about himself. If he was making it about himself, he did not say that he was going to happily go for the final game against Brighton and Hove Albion before flying away for the Africa Cup of Nations. Even though he acknowledges he doesn't know what will happen, he doesn't know whether he will play or not, he will still be there to support the team because he loves this team. This is a player that told the world that he had that until he was offered a contract, he only had 10% chance in belief that he would get to stay at Liverpool. And that wasn't entirely on his shoulders. It was about whether he would be offered a contract. Anyways, guys, the discussion about Mo Salah is one that we can literally have all day. But at least I've given you the different reactions from Rio Ferdinand, from Yemi Karaga. There's plenty of others. But maybe lastly, but not least, I've seen a Liverpool fan who jumped to the backing of Mo Salah, even though he does not agree that he should have handled the situation in the manner in which he handled it. And that I respect. But he said, and I quote, a section of Liverpool fans are saying the club should back the manager and stick with Arne Slot because he won them a league title last season. That's true. How did he win the league title? Who was a key player in that? All players were key, but Mo Salah was the master key. Like I said, Arne Slot is 1-1, Mo Salah is 1-2. Food for thought. Anyways, let's leave the Mo Salah conversation at that and switch sides and switch our attention to the game that does get underway tonight in the Premier League on Monday Night Football. That's for match day, to wrap up match day 15 between Manchester United and Wolverhampton Wanderers. Man United play away to Wolverhampton Wanderers. I think I speak with a certain level of appreciation, having seen the return of Lisandro Martinez. We saw that sort of long pass that he plays for Bruno Fernandes at the tail end of the game in their 1-1 draw against West Ham. That could have a pass that could have nearly been an assist if Bruno Fernandes had done better with it. The game couldn't have come at a better time, especially on the back of the kind of results that Man United have had, in which they've drawn 3 of the last 5 games, lost 1 and won 1. The loss coming up against Everton. They are desperate for another win. The reason that's why I say it couldn't have come at a better time. You play against a team who, until this point in the season, have only 2 points. 15 games, 14 games played, 12 lost, 2 drawn. Period. I do not think that when the match weekend comes, there's a team that fancies themselves to win 3 points than the team playing Wolves in a particular weekend. It's still not a guarantee or a given that you will win it. But when you come up against them, you do fancy your chances. Because if you can't beat up against Wolves, then possibly the other opponents may be a little too hard for you. So, I find Manchester United in no different situation. In other words, Wolves have lost their last 5 consecutive games. I do not care what the tactics are going to be. I care less what the formation will be. I care less about the stubbornness of Ruben Amorim and his lack of flexibility, as we have seen. If I were in his shoes, I, for one, I would simply play a 4-3-3, period. Go to a back 4, get your midfield trio, Casemiro, Kobe Mainoo, Bruno Fernandes at the tip of the triangle, get Matheus Cunha to the right, to the left wing, get Brian Mbeumo to the left wing, play Joshua Zirkzee. In some of your changes, you can have Manuel Ugarte for Casemiro, you can have Amadou Diallo for Brian Mbeumo or for Matheus Cunha, you can have Mason Mount for Cunha, whatever the case is. But assemble a back 4. Lenny Yoro, Matas Dedit, Luke Shaw, Diego Dalot, or Patrick Togu, or you want to go with what's his name? Lisandro Martinez, who is back, whatever the case is. Just play that format. If I were in his shoes. But we know that he loves his back three, the wing backs, the double pivot, Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro, Cunha, Mbuemo, Zaxi. Man United do come up against a team that beat them home and away last season by 2-0 at Molineux and by 1-0 at Old Trafford. The Man U that it is today is slightly better or different to the one that it was last season when Ruben Amorim had just walked through those doors. And by the way, he did take charge of both games. Then, Wolves, they themselves were battling relegation last season. Remember when they were still under Vita Pereira, who got sacked some point this season before they brought in Rob Edwards, who is yet to do a thing to change the fortunes of this Wolves side. Do I see a change from the results that we saw last season? Yeah. Can I bet on a Manchester United win? I'm not convinced so. Even though I do not think the game will end in a draw. Because when you look at the last 5 meetings between the two sides, United have won 3, Wolves won 2, and which was last season. When you go back to last season but one, there's a 4-3 victory for Man United at Molineux, and there's a 1-0 victory for Man United against Wolverhampton Wanderers. For those of you that do remember, I think, is that not the game in which no, that's not the game. There's a game in which I remember on the this should be the game, the opening weekend of the season. Rafael Varane squad, because we're talking about last season but one. Rafael Varane squad. Andre Onana clattered into Michael Dawson and Sasa Kladzic, the Wolves striker, and they did not award a penalty against them. For those of you that remember, we had a full-blown debate on this channel about those events and wondering what VAR had been up to, not to ask for an on-field review of the incident. But more importantly, let's see or look at how Man United could set up and how Wolves could set up in terms of what their probable lineups could look like. Sene Lomans to be in goal, Lenny Yoro, Luke Shaw, Nusa Mazaroi, Patrick Togu, Amadou Diallo. But, I mean, Bruno Fernandes, Casemiro, Mason Mount, Mbuemo, Cunha. For me, I wouldn't go with that. I'd make sure Zaxi plays. Mason Mount, drop to the bench. I'm sorry. Let Cunha play. Mason Mount, go to the bench. But again, it's not up to me. United still have Matas Dedit out with a knock, possibly. Harry Maguire with the hamstring. Diego Dalot had a knock. Benjamin Sesko, remember Diego Dalot scored their goal in that 1-1 draw against West Ham. While Magasa scored the equalizer. Then Wolves themselves have a whole list of injuries, including Daniel Bentley, Hugo Bueno, Enzo Gonzalez, Joao Gomez is out through suspension, having accumulated 5 yellow cards. Fernando Lopez Gonzalez with a muscular injury, so expect to see Sam Johnson in goal, Mosquera, Yason Mosquera, Emmanuel Agdo, Totti Gomez, Jackson Choa, Andrea Jean Resna, Belgrade, David Wolf, John Arias, against Strand Larson and Tolu Arokodare. Expect to see some of those faces. But I'm going to go out on a limb of faith here. And unfortunately for Manchester United, the team that do not keep a clean sheet, they've kept only one clean sheet this season, and that was in their 2-0 victory against Sunderland. So I'm going to go for Manchester United to win this game by 2-1. That's my prediction. Do let me know if you agree or disagree with that. But in the other games that game kicks off at 11 p.m., as is the game between Osasuna and Levante in the Spanish La Liga. In the Italian Serie A, there was Pisa against Parma at 5 p.m. At 8 p.m., Udinese will take on Genoa, while at quarter to 11 p.m., Torino will take on AC Milan. Then the FA Cup second round is ongoing. There will be a game between Barkley Town against Burton Albion. In case, for those of you that are betting, you could want to know those fixtures. But in terms of Super Sunday's results, there was a 1-1 draw between West Ham and Brighton. Gerard Bowen scoring there for West Ham. There was a 2-1 victory for Crystal Palace against Fulham. McGay scoring the winning goal in that game. Well, what's his name? Eddie Nketiah had scored to give Crystal Palace the lead before, I think, was it Harry Wilson that scored to restore parity for Fulham. In the Spanish La Liga, Elche beat up against Girona by 3-0, while Valencia and Sevilla shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw. Espanyol beat up against Rayo Vallecano by 0-0, while a 10-man Real Madrid were beaten up against by Celta Vigo by 2-0. So, you know, those were the games there. In the German Bundesliga, Hamburg SV beat up against Werder Bremen by 3-2, while Borussia Dortmund beat up against Hoffenheim by 2-0. The Italian Serie A, Cremonese beat up against Lecce by 2-0. Cagliari got the better of AC Roma, beating them by 0-0, while Lazio and Bologna shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw. A realist, Napoli, thanks to Rasmus Højlund's burst, beat up against Juventus by 2-1, with Kenan Yildiz scoring what turned out to be a mere consolation for Juventus. In the French League 1, Nice lost to Angers by 0-0, while Auxerre beat up against Metis by 3-1. Le Havre and Paris FC shared the spoils in a goalless draw, while Lorient beat up against Lyon by 1-0. So those were some of the results from the top 5 leagues in as far as Europe is concerned. Do not forget the UEFA Champions League does return this week. In the 11 p.m. broadcast, we will be doing the watch along between Manchester United and Wolves. That's the watch along that we'll be doing. But the UEFA Champions League that is returned on Tuesday and Wednesday, so those games will be coming. We'll get to discuss them, possibly starting tomorrow morning, and we'll see how things go. But some of the big games that you shouldn't miss for match day 6 include Liverpool away to Inter Milan. There's a game between PSG and Athletic Bilbao. There's a game between Manchester City and Real Madrid. Manchester City are going to be playing away to Real Madrid, so do not miss out on those key fixtures. But like I said, we'll discuss them in depth, possibly tomorrow, for some of the selected fixtures, as I will be running you through those fixture lineups. Otherwise, you've been such a wonderful audience this morning. Thank you so much for always tuning into the Football Tribe UG channel. Let me let you get to work, and I also run to other responsibilities and duties. It's always a pleasure sitting with you here, guys, to discuss, everything from the world of football. If there's anything we've left out, apologies. You can always bring it out in our comment section. Otherwise, stay blessed. Have a blessed week, a blessed Monday, and your start to the week. Bye-bye for now.